Everything you know about the Stone Age from school textbooks is a pitiful caricature. Clubs, loincloths, filthy savages yelling at mammoths. Forget it. If you met those people in an alley, you wouldn't see an ape. You'd see a special forces operator. Only instead of Kevlar, multi-layered clothing sewn with a precision that a modern tailor would envy. The main gadget that saved humanity from extinction wasn't a club. It was a needle. A thin, bone needle with a perfectly drilled eye. Before we invented it, we wrapped ourselves in hides thrown over our shoulders like ponchos, and the wind roamed underneath, sucking the heat away. And then someone, imagine this nameless genius, understood. If you pierce the hide and bind two pieces together with sinew, you get a suit, pants, a parka with a hood, a boot. We invented fashion not for beauty, for thermodynamics. Layering became our secret weapon. A base layer of leather against the skin, a second with fur facing inward, a third as an impenetrable windbreak. Man turned himself into a walking thermos. While our cousins, the Neanderthals, strong as bears, made do with crude capes, we were essentially cosplaying astronauts in open space. Except our space was made of ice. And so you stand in this suit, in the middle of the endless tundra steppe. Around you is not a postcard snowy forest. Around you is dry grass mixed with dust, and a horizon that stretches into gray infinity. You are hungry. Hunger in the Ice Age is not a rumbling stomach. It's when your mind begins to drift. The problem is physics. A small body loses heat faster than a large one. The mammoth, that mountain of meat and fat weighing 6 tons, has no problem with thermoregulation. But you, a scrawny primate, you're a walking battery, discharging before your own eyes. And the only way to recharge is to kill a mammoth. To kill it not with an automatic rifle. To kill it with a stick tipped with a sharpened stone. They went after these titans not because they were brave. They went because the alternative was death by starvation. Archaeologists find traces of these hunts, and your blood runs cold. In Predmosty, in what is now the Czech Republic, they excavated a site holding the bones of 1,000 mammoths. 1,000. Their tusks were used to build house frames. Their jaws made walls. Their vertebrae served as stands. This was not a hunt. This was a war of extermination. People with torches drove herds of bison to cliffs. The animals, maddened with terror, flew into the abyss, breaking their legs, and were finished off below. Woolly rhinoceroses, beasts weighing as much as a truck, died pierced by dozens of spears. The smell of blood in the frost became sweetish and almost unbearable. A mistake on such a hunt turned you into a red stain on the snow. But hunger turned us into berserkers. And then, once the carcass was butchered and the stomach stuffed with fatty meat and bone marrow, whose caloric content, by the way, exceeds any modern energy bar, night came. And that's when the most terrifying part began. Because you are wet with sweat from the butchering, and outside it's -50. Fire was not just a friend. Fire was a deity that couldn't be angered. If the fire went out, the band died. No matches, no Zippo lighters, only marcasite, flint, and tinder, which had to be kept dry at all costs. We think ancient people lived in caves, cozily wrapped in fur. That's a lie. Caves were stone sacks where drafts roamed and water dripped from the ceiling. The true home became the bone dugout. We built bunkers from mammoth bones, fastened them, covered them with dozens of hides, and piled turf on top. Imagine this life. Outside, the blizzard howls so hard you can't see your outstretched hand. The polar night lasts for months. The sun is gone. And inside, in the pale light of a fat lamp, simply burning fat in a stone bowl, 20 or 30 people sit. They aren't just waiting for spring, they are telling stories. This is where the main evolutionary explosion occurred. Not when we picked up a stone, but when we opened our mouths to lie. Yes, it was lies, fantasy, gossip that made us human. While we sat in those cramped dwellings, we created culture. We began to paint on cave walls, not for beauty. Chauvet Cave in France is not an art gallery. It's a Stone Age neural network. Terabytes of data are encoded there. How many rhinos in a herd? How a lion behaves? Where best to strike a bison? In the flickering light of the torch, the drawings moved. It was cinema, teaching young hunters how to kill. But deeper than art was the social network. We invented gods. We invented the spirit of the mammoth, who would resurrect if the bones were buried correctly. We created myths that bound the band together more strongly than fear. Cohesion in a group of 30 became an absolute weapon. We shared food not out of the kindness of our hearts. It was cold calculation. Today I feed my neighbor because tomorrow my son will break his leg and we will need help. We created a prototype of society, a pension system and insurance all in one. Neanderthals, for all their intelligence and strength, lived in small, isolated groups of 5 or 6 individuals. They didn't exchange ideas. Their needles were cruder. Their world was silent. But our ancestors created an ancient Wikipedia in their heads, and each new generation added a chapter. And then, when it seemed this hell would last forever, and we would remain the kings of ice, the ice began to melt. Imagine the irony of fate. We had tuned all our biology, all our culture, all our weapons for endless winter. And then the warmth came. The tundra steppe, our feeding ground, began to vanish. It was devoured by the damp, dense forests advancing from the south. The mammoths retreated with the shrinking glacier to shrinking islands of cold and ultimately disappeared. We were left alone in a changing world. DNA research shows a terrifying thing, the bottleneck effect. At some point, humanity shrank to a pitiful few thousand, perhaps just hundreds of individuals. We hung by a thread. Any virus, any unsuccessful hunt could have put an end to our experiment called sapiens. But we did what we do best once again. We adapted. We stopped being only hunters of giants. We began to catch fish, gather shellfish, hunt swift deer in the forests. We rewrote our operating system again. And now, thousands of years later, you sit in a warm room, perhaps with a cup of tea, watching this video. But when you pull up your hood on a windy day, when you feel an overwhelming craving for a greasy burger in the November slush, when your eyes seek out a living fire in a fireplace or on your phone screen, when you panic at the thought of loneliness, it's not your personality speaking. It's your genetic code screaming. The code of a survivor. The memory that expulsion from the tribe meant death. The memory of that campfire that couldn't be allowed to go out. We're a species that stared into the face of absolute permafrost. We looked into that abyss armed only with a bone needle, fear, and stories by the fire. And you know what? We didn't just survive. We smiled back at it. The Ice Age didn't end. It's still inside each of us. It's just that now, instead of mammoths, we hunt for a paycheck. And instead of ice storms, we endure deadlines. But the essence remains the same.